I woke up at 5:30 a.m., just like I always did. The house was still asleep, the world outside still wrapped in that quiet, peaceful stillness that only the early morning could bring. I loved this time, the calm before the chaos. The only sound was the soft hum of the coffee maker, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the kitchen as I poured myself a cup. I took a seat at the kitchen table, the warm mug between my hands. It was moments like this that reminded me why I stuck to my routine. Life felt simple, predictable, and for a long time, it had been just the way I liked it. My name is Bill. I'm 43, and I live in the small town of Silver Springs, Iowa. I have a family that, on paper, looks perfect. My wife, Katie, and our two daughters, Jill and Jenny. Everything we had built together seemed so solid, like something that could weather any storm. But recently, there's been a crack in the foundation that I can't ignore. I took a sip of coffee, watching the steam swirl up, trying to clear my head. A few months ago, I would have been eager to get started on the day, to greet Katie as she made her way down the stairs. But now, I was finding myself counting the minutes until she left for work, and I went about my day on my own. Katie hadn't been herself lately, distant, short with me, and constantly working late. It wasn't the Katie I knew, the one who would snuggle up on the couch with me after a long day, laughing at dumb TV shows and talking about our girls. Katie had always been the center of our family, the one who balanced everything with grace. But now, it felt like she was slipping away. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was overthinking things. Maybe she was just stressed. But something deep inside me said otherwise. Father's Day was coming up, and I had this small, modest celebration in mind. Nothing fancy, just a nice dinner with the family, maybe a few laughs around the table. A part of me was looking forward to it. It used to be one of those days that felt like a celebration of everything I had. My girls, my wife, my life. But this year, the thought of it just didn't sit right. I couldn't shake the feeling that something would be off. Katie had been more irritable than usual, and every time I tried to talk to her, she brushed it off like it was nothing. I let out a deep breath, trying to push those thoughts aside. I had the rest of the morning to myself before Jill and Ginny woke up, so I settled into my routine, the one thing that still felt familiar. But the nagging feeling in the back of my mind lingered, like a shadow that wouldn't leave me alone. The clock ticked on, and I tried to push away the unease building in my chest. The Friday before Father's Day, Katie did something that struck me as off. She dressed up for the evening, something she rarely did for work these days, and told me she was going out with some coworkers. It wasn't the first time she'd done this recently, working late, socializing outside of the house. But there was something about her tone, the way she spoke, that made me pause. It felt like she was trying to convince me everything was fine. Have a good time, I said, trying to mask the concern in my voice. Katie flashed me a quick, distracted smile as she grabbed her purse, her mind already on something else. I'll be back late. Don't wait up. I nodded, watching her leave, but the tight knot in my stomach only grew tighter. The last time she had gone out like this, I'd found myself sitting at home, wondering if it was just her need to unwind, or if it was something more. It was becoming a pattern now, her absence, her coldness. That night, Katie came back around midnight, and I was still awake, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that had settled deep in my gut. I heard her key in the door and listened as she entered the house, walking with a quiet intensity. The house was dark, just the faint glow of the streetlight creeping through the blinds. She didn't say anything at first, but I could hear the rush of water from the bathroom as she headed straight to the shower. My eyes drifted over to the clock. It was 12:30 a.m., and I was wide awake, staring into the nothingness of our living room, waiting for some explanation that never came. The sound of the shower stopped, and the silence that followed felt even heavier. She emerged a few minutes later, her face tired, her hair damp, and yet, there was an air of detachment about her that I couldn't ignore. She didn't even glance at me as she walked past, heading for the bedroom without a word. I stood there, watching her retreat, feeling more like a stranger than a husband. I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the pieces were starting to form a picture I wasn't sure I wanted to see. The next morning, something even more unsettling happened. Katie, still half-dressed for work, breezed through the kitchen as I was making coffee. She didn't look at me as she grabbed her things and walked out the door. But it was the little thing she always did. Kiss me goodbye. That was missing. She didn't kiss me. I felt it then, that cold void between us, even though she hadn't said a word. It stung in a way that I couldn't shake off. I stood there for a long time after the door closed, the silence louder than the sound of her leaving. At work, I tried to bury my thoughts under the weight of files and deadlines, but the unease never left. During my coffee break, I ran into Missy, the barista at the cafe I frequent. She had been a friendly face at the counter for months, always noticing when something was off, and today was no different. "Bill, you look like you're carrying the weight of the world," she said, setting my coffee down with a knowing smile. I chuckled dryly, trying to hide the tension in my voice. "Just one of those mornings, I guess." She raised an eyebrow, leaning in slightly. "You know, you can always talk about it. I'm a pretty good listener." I shook my head. "Nothing to talk about. Just stuff at home. You know life. It gets weird sometimes." Missy smiled warmly. "Life has a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure if she understood just how badly I was swinging and missing. But as I sipped my coffee and tried to focus on the work ahead, a sinking feeling settled deeper in my chest. I couldn't shake the thought that something was wrong, something bigger than I could ignore. Katie had always been my partner, my confidant. And now, with Father's Day just around the corner, it felt like the ground beneath us was shifting in a way I couldn't control. The family I had worked so hard to protect was beginning to slip away, and I had no idea how to stop it. Later that afternoon, I learned something that knocked the wind right out of me. Katie and the girls had planned a day at the beach for Father's Day. I hadn't even been included in the plans. It wasn't just Father's Day, it was also my birthday. No mention of either. No cake. No card. Nothing. I sat there, staring at my phone, rereading the text message from Katie. "We're going to the beach for the day, Dad. We'll see you later." I was blindsided. It wasn't like her. It wasn't like them. Something was definitely wrong. And this time, I couldn't ignore it any longer. The uneasy feeling in my chest began to solidify into something darker, a suspicion I couldn't shake. Katie, my wife, had begun pulling away. And the worst part? I was starting to wonder if I was the last one to realize it. Father's Day morning arrived, and the house felt emptier than usual. The girls, Jill and Jenny, weren't even up yet, and Katie had already left for the beach. She had barely said a word to me as she grabbed her things and rushed out the door, her words just a quick, "I'll be back later," before the sound of the front door closing echoed through the house. I stood there, coffee in hand, the weight of the day settling in my chest. The morning that was supposed to be about family, about celebrating everything we had built together, felt like an afterthought. I had no plans now, no reason to celebrate. Katie hadn't even remembered my birthday. I sat on the couch for a long while, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. My mind kept racing through the same questions. What had changed? Why was she pulling away? I had no answers, just the cold emptiness of an unanswered phone and the hollow silence where laughter used to be. I couldn't sit there any longer. I had to get out. I grabbed my jacket, deciding to distract myself with a quick visit to the bar, maybe grab a drink. It wasn't even noon, but at that point, I didn't care. I walked into the local sports bar, the familiar smell of fried food and beer hitting me like a wave. Lance and Jerry were there, two older guys I had gotten to know over the years. They were regulars, always willing to chat about anything, and today, I could use the distraction. "Bill, you look like a guy who needs a drink," Jerry said, patting the stool beside him. "Yeah," I said, sitting down. "I could use something strong today." Lance raised an eyebrow as the bartender slid a drink over to me. "Everything okay, Bill? You look like someone just took the wind out of your sails." I didn't want to get into it, but I was past caring. It's nothing, really. Just a rough morning." Jerry leaned in, his voice lowering. "You know, you don't look like a guy having a rough morning. You look like a guy who's had enough." I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, maybe. My wife's been distant lately. And today's Father's Day. She's at the beach with the girls. Didn't even acknowledge my birthday. Not a card, not a word, not even a hug." Lance and Jerry exchanged a glance. "That don't sound right," Lance said, taking a sip of his beer. "What's going on with her?" "I don't know," I replied, staring into my drink. "But I feel like something's changing. I mean, it's been a while since things felt normal. And now, today, I'm sitting here alone, not even a damn phone call." Jerry nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "Sounds like she's checked out." I felt a tight knot form in my chest. "You think so?" Lance chuckled darkly. It's hard not to, man. You don't just wake up and pull away like that without a reason. I've seen it too many times. I didn't want to hear it, but I couldn't deny the truth in their words. I had been ignoring the signs for too long, telling myself it was just a phase, a rough patch. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe Katie really was pulling away. I don't have proof, I said, my voice quieter now. No evidence. Just a gut feeling. Gut feeling? Jerry asked, his voice soft. Bill, that's all you need. If your gut's telling you something's wrong, then it probably is. You don't need concrete proof. Trust yourself. I looked down at my drink, swirling it in my hand. I didn't want to believe it, but there it was. The doubt, growing like a weed in the back of my mind. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw Katie's name on the screen. My heart skipped a beat, but I hesitated before answering. Hello. Hey. Katie's voice came through, softer than usual. I know I haven't been around much. I've just been really busy. But I was thinking about you. I swallowed hard, the words sitting heavy in my chest. Really? Because I've been thinking about you too. A lot. But I haven't seen much of you lately. I know, she said, her voice wavering slightly. I'm sorry. Things have just been off. Work, the girls, everything. I haven't been handling it well. The pit in my stomach deepened. Katie, it's not just work. You've been distant for months now. It's like you're not even here anymore. I know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it has. I don't know how to fix it, Bill. There it was. The truth, hanging in the air between us, unspoken but clear. I don't know how to fix it either, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But I can't keep pretending like everything's fine. We need to talk. We need to figure this out. Katie was silent for a long moment. I know. I'll be home later tonight. We'll talk then. I ended the call without saying anything else, staring at the screen, unsure of what I was feeling anymore. It was clear now, something had changed, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. Father's Day had come, but it wasn't the celebration I had hoped for. It was the beginning of something else, something I wasn't sure I was ready for. The truth was out there, and soon, I'd have to face it. But first, I had to decide what I was willing to fight for. I spent my birthday alone in a restaurant. It wasn't the plan, but after the phone call with Katie, after everything that had happened, I just couldn't face the idea of being home with her. The restaurant was a quiet spot on the edge of town, the kind where the food was good, but the atmosphere was even better. I wanted to be somewhere where no one knew me, where I didn't have to pretend that everything was okay. I sat at the bar, nursing a glass of red wine, the empty seat beside me a stark reminder of how different things were. It was supposed to be a day to feel special, to feel appreciated. Instead, I felt like a ghost. As I picked at the small plate of food in front of me, my phone buzzed again. It was Katie, just like before. A part of me wanted to answer, to hear what she had to say this time. But the other part of me felt like I'd heard it all before. Excuses, apologies, and promises to fix things. But the truth was, I didn't know if I believed her anymore. I set the phone face down, pushing it aside. I needed to think. It wasn't until I checked my messages a few minutes later that I saw something that hit me like a freight train. A picture. A group shot of Katie and the girls, laughing, in bathing suits, on the beach. The message came from my mother-in-law, a casual text that made my heart stop. Glad you guys are having fun. Looks like you're all having a great time today. I hope Bill doesn't mind being alone. That was it. Father's Day, my birthday, and the text had nothing to do with me. It was like I didn't exist. I stared at the image of them together, the three of them on the beach, smiling, carefree, without me. I wanted to be angry, but all I could feel was a cold, gnawing emptiness. Katie and the girls had spent the day without me, and the worst part was, no one had even bothered to mention it. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I couldn't just sit there wallowing in self-pity. But I felt betrayed. Not in the traditional sense, not like she'd done something terrible. No, this was the kind of betrayal that hit deeper. The kind where you realize someone you love just stopped caring. The restaurant started to fill up as the evening went on, the sound of conversation and laughter swelling around me. But I was alone, even in a crowded place. I stayed for a while longer, pretending to enjoy the food, pretending to enjoy the wine, but all the while, the images of Katie, the girls, the beach, it all kept playing in my head. I was the afterthought, not even worth a mention. When I finally got up to leave, I pulled out my phone to call Katie, But before I could tap her name, a new message popped up. It was from Missy, the barista. "Hey Bill, I know this is a bit forward, but if you ever want to talk, I'm always around. Sometimes it's easier to just vent to a stranger, right?" I stared at the message for a long time. It was kind, but there was something about it that felt like a lifeline. Maybe I wasn't ready to talk to Katie, but Missy, she didn't have any history with me. She wasn't tied to all the weight I'd been carrying. It would be easier to talk to her, someone who didn't have an opinion or expectations. I couldn't help myself. I typed back, "I'd appreciate that. Maybe we could meet up soon?" The response came quickly. "I'm free tomorrow. Meet me for coffee if you feel like it." I typed my reply without thinking. "I'll be there." I slipped my phone back into my pocket, pushing aside the tightness in my chest. I didn't know what to expect, but something in me told me that I needed this. I needed to hear another perspective, to stop feeling like I was drowning in my own doubts and fears. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air, the city lights blurring in the distance. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was taking a step forward. Maybe this was the first real step in figuring out what I wanted, what I deserved. Maybe it was time to stop letting myself be the person who waited, who hoped, who made excuses. Tomorrow was a new day, and whatever happened, I was going to face it head on. The next morning was quiet, too quiet. Katie had stayed the night at work, again. No good morning kiss. No sign of life except for a text saying she was swamped and would be home later. I didn't know what later meant anymore. It used to mean a couple of hours, a glass of wine, and some conversation. Now it was just a vague promise that never really arrived. I took a deep breath and decided to meet Missy for coffee. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew I needed to stop spinning in circles. I needed clarity. And Missy, as strange as it felt, was the only person outside my world who had reached out. Maybe that meant something. I arrived at the coffee shop early, hoping to catch a bit of quiet before the rush. It was one of those places where the smell of fresh espresso filled the air, and the soft murmur of patrons gave it a comforting hum. I sat at a table by the window, watching people hurry by outside, completely unaware of the chaos going on in my head. Missy arrived just as I was taking a sip of my coffee. She smiled, walking in with an easy confidence, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Hey, Bill," she said as she approached, her voice warm and welcoming. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I know it can be strange, but sometimes it helps to talk to someone who's not wrapped up in your world." "Not at all," I replied, gesturing to the seat across from me. "I appreciate it, honestly." She sat down, looking at me with kind eyes. "I didn't mean to pry, but I saw something in you the other day. You seemed like you were holding something back, like you were carrying the weight of the world." I nodded, feeling the tightness in my chest. "It's just, a lot has been happening at home. My wife and I, we're not the way we used to be, and I don't know what happened or when it started, but now it's like I'm invisible. I can't even tell if she still cares, or if I'm just here, taking up space." Missy listened quietly, her gaze focused but not judgmental. It's really hard when someone you love becomes a stranger, even if they're still there physically. "I can't imagine what you're going through, but it sounds like you're at a breaking point." I ran a hand through my hair, the frustration bubbling to the surface. "I don't know if it's me or her. She's distant, and I've tried talking to her about it, but she just brushes me off. I don't know what's going on in her head anymore. And on top of all that, I'm starting to wonder if she's been seeing someone else. I don't have proof, just these gut feelings, but they're so strong now. It's suffocating." "Do you think she's hiding something?" Missy asked, her voice gentle but direct. I hesitated. "I don't know. I see how she's been acting lately, and there's this shift, you know? It's like I don't exist in her life the way I used to. Like I'm just a fixture in the background." Missy gave a small nod, her expression sympathetic. "I've seen that kind of shift before, Bill. And it's tough, especially when you're the one who's left behind, trying to figure out why you're being ignored. But sometimes, people don't tell us what's wrong. They pull away, and it's not always about us. Maybe she's struggling with something of her own, but it's not an excuse to leave you hanging." I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Maybe, but it's hard to keep pretending everything's fine when I can feel the distance growing. Father's Day, my birthday, it's like she didn't even notice. I don't think I've ever felt more alone in my life. She took a slow sip of her coffee, her eyes steady on me. "I don't want to say this lightly, but it sounds like you've been making excuses for her. You've been holding on, waiting for her to come back to you. but she's not giving you anything to hold on to anymore. And that's not fair to you, Bill. You deserve more than just hoping someone will notice you." Her words hit harder than I expected, and I couldn't help but feel the sting of truth. I had been making excuses. I had been hoping, but maybe hoping wasn't enough anymore. Missy's voice softened. "I know it's hard to think about, but sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward. You can't carry someone else's weight without losing yourself in the process. And right now, you're losing yourself." "I don't want to lose her," I whispered, the weight of the admission crushing me. "I get that," she said, "but you can't keep giving without getting anything in return. You're allowed to protect yourself, too. Whatever happens, you deserve to be seen, to be loved, and to feel like you matter." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like someone understood. I had been so consumed by trying to fix things with Katie, trying to make it all work, that I had forgotten about me. I had let myself get lost in the idea of what our family should be, instead of acknowledging what it had become. "I don't know what to do next," I said, my voice low. Missy smiled gently. "You don't have to have all the answers right now, but maybe it's time to give yourself permission to think about what you need, to take a step back and decide what's best for you, not just what's best for the marriage." I stared out the window, my thoughts swirling. Katie's distance, my own doubts, the weight of it all. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had some clarity. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was starting to see that I couldn't fix everything. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. "Thanks, Missy," I said, finally looking back at her. I needed to hear that. She smiled. "Anytime. You're not alone in this, Bill. You've got people who care." I stood up, ready to leave the coffee shop, feeling a little lighter than I had in days. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't walking it alone. Maybe it was time to stop holding on to something that was already slipping away. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to start thinking about what came next. For me, the days after my coffee with Missy felt like walking through a fog. I was no longer ignoring the truth. I wasn't sure when it happened, but I had finally accepted that my marriage was over. Katie hadn't come home that night after our brief conversation. She hadn't come home the next night, either. And every time I called her, it went straight to voicemail. I spent the next few days trying to fill the emptiness with work. I kept my head down, pushing through meetings, phone calls, and emails like a machine. But when I got home each night, the silence in the house swallowed me whole. It was suffocating. It was a reminder that I was alone in a place that used to be filled with life. And even though I knew it was coming, I wasn't prepared for the final blow. Katie came home that Friday afternoon. The house smelled like the same old familiarity, dusty sunlight, the faint smell of coffee still lingering in the air, but there was a shift in the air now. I could feel it in my bones. She stood in the doorway for a moment, her bag slung over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. She hadn't even taken off her shoes yet. "I think we need to talk," she said, her voice hoarse, like she hadn't spoken in days. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the tension. But what was there left to say? We had already said everything in 100 different ways without words. Katie set her bag down on the counter, and I caught a glimpse of her face. A face I hadn't really seen in months. There was no spark there, no joy, just exhaustion and resignation. "About what?" I asked, my voice flat. "About us. About this marriage. About everything." She swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know where we went wrong, Bill. But I can't keep pretending things are okay when they're not." My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to ask why it took her so long to realize what was happening. But I just stood there, my hands in my pockets, waiting for her to continue. "I've been seeing someone else," she said, her words sharp, like they cut through the air between us. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. I couldn't process it. "What?" My voice cracked, and I hated myself for sounding like that, for sounding weak. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did," Katie continued, her eyes avoiding mine. "It's been going on for a few months now, and I know I should have told you sooner, but I didn't know how. I was scared." I stood frozen, my mind reeling. Months? My stomach churned. I had known something was off, but I never thought it would come to this. The betrayal felt like a physical weight pressing down on me, suffocating me. "I don't know what to say," I muttered. How could you do this to me, Katie? To us?" She shook her head slowly, her eyes finally meeting mine. I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you. But I've been so unhappy for so long, and I didn't know how to fix it. I thought maybe I could find something outside of this. Outside of us. You're really telling me this now? I was shaking, the anger bubbling up in me, rising higher than it had ever been before. After everything? After all these years? You waited until now to tell me you've been cheating? Katie's face crumpled, like she was about to break into tears, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Not now. Not after everything. I know, she whispered, looking at the floor. I've been a terrible person. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I don't know what else to say. I'm so sorry. The apology fell flat. It meant nothing. Nothing would ever make this right. My hands were balled into fists at my sides, but I didn't know what to do with them. The person I had loved, the person I had trusted, was gone. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the pain was too much. I had spent years fighting for this family, making sure everyone was okay, making sure everything worked. And now? Now it felt like I was standing in the ruins of everything I had built. I can't do this anymore, Katie, I said, the words coming out quieter than I meant them to. I can't. I've tried, but I'm done. Her face crumbled, the tears she had been holding back finally spilling over. Bill, please, don't say that. We can fix this. We can figure this out. No, I said, the word coming out sharper this time. There's nothing to fix. You made your choice. And so did I. She reached out to me, but I took a step back, away from her touch. I deserve better than this, Katie. I don't even know who you are anymore. You're not the person I married. The look on her face broke me. I wanted to reach out and hold her, to make everything right again, but I couldn't. I couldn't pretend this was fixable. I couldn't pretend that she hadn't already walked away, piece by piece, over the past few months. Maybe you're right, she said quietly, wiping her tears away. Maybe it's too late. I nodded, the ache in my chest heavy and unrelenting. Yeah, maybe it is. She turned away, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the empty house. I didn't follow her. I didn't stop her. I just stood there, watching her leave, knowing it was the last time I would ever see her as my wife. I had made my decision. There was no going back. I wasn't sure what came next. But for the first time in months, I felt something close to relief. I was done pretending, done holding on to something that had slipped away long ago. Katie wasn't the woman I had married, and I wasn't the man I used to be. But I was going to find out who I was again, on my own. The silence that filled the house was deafening, but it was my silence now. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward rebuilding. The weeks after Katie left were the hardest of my life. The house that had once felt like a home now felt like a hollow shell, the walls closing in on me. There was no more laughter, no more chaos of the girls running around. Just silence. Silence that echoed in every corner, reminding me of the life I had lost. I threw myself into work. It was easier to focus on the bar, to deal with clients and employees who didn't ask questions, who didn't look at me with pity. They only saw the owner of a successful business, the man who could handle anything. But behind the polished exterior, I was breaking apart. My heart felt heavy, weighed down by the absence of my family, and the only way I knew how to keep going was to bury myself in the mundane. It wasn't until Missy reached out again that I realized I hadn't been living. I'd been surviving. She texted me one evening, a simple message that made me stop and think. Hey Bill, how's everything going? You've been on my mind. If you ever want to talk or grab a drink, I'm around. I stared at the message for a long time before I replied. She had been there for me when I needed someone to talk to, and I realized I could use a friend now. Someone who didn't carry the baggage of my past, someone who was just there. Thanks, Missy. I could use some company. We set up a time to meet at a local bar later that week. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I showed up early, the familiar hum of the bar filling the space around me as I waited. When Missy arrived, I was struck by how easy it was to be around her. There was no pressure, no expectations, just a shared understanding that life could be messy and unpredictable, but it didn't have to be complicated. We spent hours talking about everything and nothing. She asked about my girls, and I found myself smiling for the first time in weeks as I talked about their hobbies, their dreams. I hadn't realized how much I had missed sharing those moments with someone. And for a while, I didn't think about Katie or the mess she had left behind. What about you? I asked, genuinely curious. How have you been holding up? Missy paused for a moment, her eyes reflecting the dim light of the bar. I've been good. A little lonely, I guess. But it's a lot easier to focus on myself right now. I'm not looking for anything complicated. I've had enough of that in my life. I nodded, understanding. Complicated. Yeah, that seems to be a theme in my life lately. She smiled softly. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? But you can't let them define you. I looked at her, her words sinking in. I had spent so long defining myself by the roles I played, husband, father, provider, but now, I was learning to define myself outside of those labels. I had spent months living for others, but now it was time to live for me. We talked late into the night, the hours slipping by unnoticed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about the house, about Katie, about what I had lost. I was focused on the present, on the person sitting across from me, on the quiet comfort of her company. When we finally parted ways, Missy gave me a warm hug. Take care of yourself, Bill, she said, her voice sincere. And don't forget to keep moving forward. I left the bar feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was ready to face it. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time since Katie left, I didn't feel lost. There was pain, yes, but it wasn't as consuming as it had been. I had taken a step toward healing, even if I wasn't sure what that healing would look like. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Jill. Dad, can we come visit you this weekend? My heart skipped a beat. They hadn't visited in a while, and I realized how much I missed them. The thought of seeing their faces, of feeling like a dad again, was the kind of thing I needed to help rebuild my life. I texted her back immediately. Of course, I'd love that. Let's plan something fun. It was a small step, but it felt big. It felt like the start of something. A shift. A chance to rebuild not just the life I had lost, but the life I could still have. One that was mine, one that I controlled. And maybe, just maybe, it could be a life filled with laughter again. With love. With meaning. I was moving forward. One step at a time. It had been a few months since that night at the bar with Missy, and life had started to feel different. Not easy, not perfect, but different. It was like a fog had lifted, and I could finally breathe again. I had made some progress, but I knew healing wasn't linear. Some days felt like I was moving forward, and others felt like I was stuck, unable to move past the hurt that lingered. But I had something I hadn't had in a long time. Hope. I was rebuilding my relationship with Jill and Jenny, and it felt good. They had started coming over more, spending time with me like they used to, and it meant everything to me. There were moments, small moments, when I would catch them laughing, or just being themselves, and I realized I was finding pieces of the man I used to be. A father. Not just someone who provided, but someone who showed up. It wasn't just the girls that had changed my perspective. Missy had continued to be a quiet support in my life. We saw each other now and then, grabbed coffee or dinner, just simple things. There was no rush to label anything, no pressure. But I could feel the foundation of a friendship, maybe more, growing between us. She had become someone I trusted, someone I could lean on when the weight of my past threatened to pull me back. One afternoon, Missy and I sat outside at the local cafe, enjoying the sun and the easy rhythm of conversation. She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. So, how's it going? She asked, stirring her drink absently. Are you feeling better about things? I hesitated, looking out at the street where cars passed by, their drivers unaware of the changes happening just a few feet away. Yeah, I think I'm actually starting to feel like I can handle it. Not everything, not yet. But I'm trying to take it day by day. And the girls, they're everything to me. Missy nodded, a soft smile playing on her lips. That's good to hear. You deserve peace, Bill. You've been through a lot. The weight of her words settled over me like a warm blanket. Peace. That was what I was striving for. I'd spent so long in the chaos of my marriage, trying to fix things, trying to make everything work, that I had forgotten what it felt like to just be still, to be content with the now, rather than the what could have been. I took a deep breath, trying to settle into the moment. I'm not where I thought I'd be, but I'm where I need to be. I don't have all the answers. I don't know if I'll ever feel whole again, but I know I'm better than I was. That's all we can ask for, Missy said quietly, her voice like a soft affirmation. You've come a long way, Bill, and I think you'll keep getting stronger. Her words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time, I felt like someone truly understood. Not just the surface-level pain, but the deep, aching shift that came with realizing I was no longer who I used to be. I wasn't just a husband, a father. I was me, and that was enough. A few weeks later, I stood in my parents' living room, a little nervous, but hopeful. Jill and Ginny were sitting on the couch, chatting away, while my mom fawned over them. It was one of those rare moments when everything felt right again. The house was filled with laughter, and even my dad, who usually sat quietly, was chiming in with a joke or two. I had agreed to bring the girls over for a family dinner. It felt important for them, and for me. Even though things with Katie were still strained, this was a step toward healing, towards finding the new version of myself, the one that wasn't just defined by the failed marriage, but by the connections I had, by the family I still had. "How's work?" my mom asked as she set the table. "Still keeping busy?" "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Things are good. It's been a different kind of good. I'm adjusting, but I'm getting there." My mom smiled at me, a softness in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a while. "You've always had a good heart, Bill. I know this hasn't been easy on you." "I'm learning," I said, my voice quiet, but steady. "But I've got the girls, and I'm doing my best to be the dad they need. I don't know where that leads, but I know I can't lose sight of that." Jill and Ginny both smiled at me, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel that tight, unbearable ache. I felt proud of what I was becoming, what I was learning to be, and how I was rebuilding. Later that night, as I tucked the girls into bed, they each gave me a hug. Jill, the older one, leaned in and whispered, "I'm glad you're happy, Dad." I held her for a moment, feeling her small frame in my arms, and for the first time in so long, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The future wasn't perfect. It would never be what I had dreamed of when I was younger, but it was mine. I had control over it, and I had the love of my daughters, the support of people who cared, and the chance to build something new from the ground up. As I walked downstairs to join my parents, Missy's words echoed in my head, "You deserve peace." And for the first time in months, I truly felt like I was finding it. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but maybe that was the point. Maybe this new chapter, however messy or uncertain, was exactly what I needed. And as I sat down with my family, with my girls and my parents, I realized something. This was what mattered. Not the past, not the mistakes, but the present. The people who were still here, still standing by me. The future? It would come in time. But for now, this moment was enough. And that was a good place to start.